Okay, Brian, so we're on to episode 10 of season 2, which is called Red Museum, and I love that title. Obviously, going into this episode, had no idea what it meant, I just loved the way it sounded. So, is this a big episode in the X-Files community, or is it more middle of the road?
I think it's probably more middle of the road, to be honest. I don't think it's an episode that particularly offends anyone. It's just probably not that memorable either. It is a mythology episode, technically speaking, but I think that by the time we get to the end of it, we may be debating just how necessary of a mythology episode it is. You take any mythology episode, really it should kind of be integral to the overall story of the X-Files. I'm not sure we can say that about this one.
Right. Okay, so shall we just jump right into it?
Yeah, okay. So we start at a slaughterhouse. Nothing bad can happen there, I'm sure. And it doesn't.
No, absolutely
because we follow this female character home. So, she works there, she goes home, she meets her two sons, says she's going for a shower, goes for a shower, and we see that somebody is peeping on her through a hole in her wall. And then the phone goes, and her eldest of her two sons, answers the phone, and then suddenly makes himself scarce, tells the younger brother to just let his mum know he'll be back in 5 minutes. But he isn't back in 5 minutes. He's actually picked up on the road by a couple of police officers, dressed in nothing but his tighty-whities, and a sign on his back saying he is one. Cue opening titles.
Yeah, I like to think of this as a bit like a kitchen sink opener, as in they throw in everything, including the kitchen sink. It starts off at the slaughterhouse. We've got a feeling it's going to be a bit like Blood, that kind of psychological or mismanagement of equipment or something along those lines. It goes home and it's the peeping Tom aspect, and you're like, okay, it's a bit like Squeeze, somebody's watching, you don't know what's going to happen. And then you get an abduction of the boy, and you're like, wow, I don't know where this episode is going at all. It could go in a number of directions, and all of them seem fairly interesting at this point. I'd be happy to follow any of these story threads, but it just seems to be throwing everything at the screen at once.
Yeah, I mean, I get some kind of flashbacks to the pilot episode as well, because the lad's just out in his underwear, and he's kind of out near the woods, a bit delirious. It makes me think of Billy Miles in that first episode. So yeah, like you, obviously I knew where it was going. I've seen it loads of times, but certainly the first time I saw this, I remember thinking, not got a clue where this is going. What type of episode is this? So we move on past the opening titles, and Mulder is showing Scully some slides. Gary, who is the young man who had the sign written on his back, he wasn't the only victim, and a local sheriff of the town where these kids have been taken and then brought back with signs written on their backs, he thinks that they've been possessed, of all things. So
out of all the ways I thought the story was going, I was pretty damn sure that it wasn't possession. It just didn't fit in with the person behind the wall, or the fact that they get the phone call and things like that. I just wasn't buying the whole possession element of it. And then and the fact that the local policemen's came out with this, it really did highlight to me the fact that Mulder and Scully keep dealing with all these local police, and almost all of them seem like complete idiots or neglectful of their job. I mean, it's not really painting a decent picture of all these law enforcement officers. But yeah, this one's another crazy one with, its possessions.
Yeah, I mean, we've had a couple along the way that we've kind of respected, where we thought, they actually are decent, but they kind of jump out at us because they're so far from the norm. Yeah, the typical local sheriff tends to be this guy. Who, I mean, as we'll see when the episode goes on, I'm sure the apple doesn't fall very far from the tree. Although that in itself is something of a contrivance, I think, to get us to a certain point towards the end. But yeah, anyway, so Mulder and Scully are driving as passengers with the sheriff, who tells them about a vegetarian cult named Red Museum, run by a man named Odin.
Yeah, I like I said, I've said this a couple of times. I don't know why it's a phrase or just two words put together that really sparks a nice image in my head. Red Museum. I like the idea of that phrasing. Makes not a lick of sense. Realistically,
I mean, you said at the start of this that you weren't quite sure what it meant. By the time we get to the episode, the end of the episode, I'm still not quite sure what it means, to be honest.
No, not at all. It's almost like it's just word association. You know, somebody shouted out red, somebody shouted out museum. They're like, bingo, that's the one we're going for.
Absolutely. I'm thinking about it, and I'm thinking about this whole idea of walk-ins, which comes up in a bit. Maybe walk-ins is like bodies storing souls in the way that a museum stores artifacts, and so maybe. But yeah, we're never told that.
I was sort of clinging to the fact that it used to be like a farm that raised like livestock type of thing, which was soaked in blood or raised in blood, and it's now unused like a museum.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. That makes more sense actually.
But then we're just pulling this out there. There's
we're pulling it out somewhere. I'll tell you that much. But yeah, so they go and see one of the services run by Odin and this church. And it's a really bizarre service, to say the least, because it ain't like any church service I've ever been to. Odin comes out, and rather than preaching from the pulpit, he types from the pulpit. He basically types his message, and it comes up on this screen behind him, and everyone kind of just watches with eager eyes. And he claims that this message, the messages he types just come to him there and then. He channels them, I guess, from whatever deity they feel they believe in. But Mulder establishes that these people, the Red Museum, believe themselves to be what he calls walk-ins, which are souls that have possessed multiple bodies. And they don't believe in eating flesh, and so the three non-believers must be taught as he types on the screen. Yeah. So what do you make of this walk-ins business?
I'm not really too sure that that even the writers know what they're talking about with this one, because I feel as if they're kind of loosey-goosey with the information on this, and they don't really tie it down to any facts. It's just kind of like, it means this kind of airy-fairy term. Let's quickly move on.
Yeah, and there is a small attempt to explain it a little later on, which we'll get to. But I think
it's the next scene.
I think it just does nothing but confuse me even further. So,
so this Odin guy, we know him, of course, from Shawshank Redemption.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And he's kind of weird when he comes out, because honestly, I thought he was a mute or something.
Yeah.
Because he sits down and starts typing, he never says a word. And let's just quickly talk about their outfits, Brian. This pristine white coats and their red turbans.
Let's face it, they look like giant bellends,
that might just be you in that one, Brian.
Anyway, swiftly moving on.
Yes.
So they go to interview Gary. They go to Gary's home. The young boy who was abducted. I say young. He's like in his late 20s, or he looks like he is anyway. So they interview Gary, who thinks that he can. He thinks he remembers an animal spirit entering his body. So while he's talking about that, Scully wanders off down the corridor, and decides to start doing grand designs on the house. She starts straightening photos for some reason. Whatever. But then Stevie, the younger brother, kind of comes out of his room, and she asks him if he knows who rang that night. All the while, she's being watched.
Yeah. By the peeping Tom. The way Scully looks at the light beam that's coming through the mirror, you feel as if she's kind of cottoned onto this, but then you think she's going to act, but ultimately doesn't. And I feel that this scene's there just to get another look at the peeping Tom. I don't really feel it adds much, because there's no clues here to be garnered. There's nothing that really helps the the investigation move forward at all.
Yeah.
You don't need to learn anything about the characters or anything. It just feels like it's there for another Peeping Tom episode.
I mean, it's more intrigue, isn't it? It's like,
Yeah.
It's mainly to hear that was Gary possessed. You know, the sheriff's got this whacked out theory about possession, and what Gary is saying does seem to back that up. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so they exit the house, and the sheriff tells Mulder that Gary has changed. Completely dropped football. This is a kid who really loved his football. He's completely dropped it. Mulder asks if the people of the town ever single out the members of Red Museum, like bullying them, picking on them, that kind of thing. And then he asks for a good hotel and a place to eat. So
Yes.
yeah.
And then we quickly go from there to Mulder and Scully just stuffing their faces with red meat.
Yeah, Scully proving herself to be a very messy eater at this point. She's just oozing that stuff down her chin. But it does make for a rather nice moment between the two.
Yeah, a non-sexualised moment. Where another TV show, it would be pushing the sort of romantic element. Here, there is not even a hint of that going on.
Yeah, it's just literally just
a fresh take.
Yeah, respectful, friendship between the two, in which they feel comfortable enough to do something as simple as wiping some sauce off the other person's mouth. So yeah, it's a nice moment, and it's it's indicative of one of the reasons why I love this relationship so much. So yeah. Okay, so Scully's a messy eater. Mulder wipes it off her chin. And then she asks Mulder to explain this walk-ins theory a bit more. So this is it. I'm sat there and thinking, oh, great, right, let's hear what this walk-ins thing is. This is what Mulder says. He says, if you lose hope or become in despair, you leave yourself open to inhabitation by an enlightened spirit. Okay. That doesn't explain anything to me, really. In fact, it confuses me further, because I could buy the opposite. Like if somebody was like in a really dark place, saw no hope, I could buy that they might leave themselves open to dark spirits or demon possession or something like that. So yeah, I don't know, being filled with an enlightened spirit.
You do hear of these people who have hit rock bottom, who do, I don't know, see a light or speak to God or feel as if they've been touched in some way and they fix their life, but they have to hit that rock bottom before they're willing to make a change, type of thing. It could be hinting towards that, but
that usually requires a certain level of action on their part, in the sense that they recognise the slump they're in, so they pray to God, or somebody intervenes and helps them, or it's like if you're talking about an act of God in that respect. But here it's like they're going for the whole possession thing, they're possessed essentially by an enlightened spirit. They're still talking essentially about a form of possession. And when you look at people who like you've described, you hear stories about people, they got out of those dark places and whatnot. They don't say that they were possessed by, an enlightened spirit. I don't know. It doesn't. Yeah, it sounds a bit weird, this explanation to me. It just sounds a little bit off kilter, a little bit bizarre. Don't quite add up to me, but hey.
I don't even think that the fact that they don't even spend that much time discussing it makes it feel as if it's negligible. It's just there to highlight something that may be mentioned in some dark corner of the internet.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so Mulder gives that bizarre explanation. Then they see a group of what I can only describe as douchebags, led by Rick, who is the sheriff's son, bullying. And you gotta love the originality of bullies here. What they call a diaper head.
Yeah.
So what I say looks like a big bell end, they call a diaper head. Love the originality there, but yeah. So
Yeah.
Mulder and Scully intervene. Yeah, they step in. They kind of look like a married couple, and the bullies are kind of like they're not taking any notice of him until Scully kind of shows them her gun. So yeah,
I think it's just accidentally seen one of them spots it type of thing, and that's how we find out he's the sheriff's son. But I think my favourite part about this whole scene is when Scully comes out of the restaurant and tears off her plastic bib. You know, it's such just a strange image. It's just one of these throwaway things.
It's like the equivalent of Clark Kent ripping open his shirt.
Oh, pretty much. It's fantastic.
Yeah. Excellent. Okay. So yeah, we go from there, and this just as if they hadn't emphasised just how much of a douchebag Rick is already. We see him dropping his girlfriend off, but not at the door of her house. Literally at the end of the street, he drops her off, essentially lets her get out of the car, and then she has to walk half a mile up the street to her house. He doesn't even stay in the car to watch her walk there. He just literally. He's done. He's off. He's gone. He leaves her to be chloroformed by the crazy.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, they're just doubling down on the douchebaggery.
Yeah, pretty much.
The guy's like, as soon as she's out the car, she's forgotten about. He's off up the street. She's going to get buffalo billed.
Yeah,
and that's it.
Pretty much. Yeah. So she's out in the forest. You know, we cut to the. A little bit later, she's out in the forest. She's in a tighty whities again, like as with Gary, and she's seen visions. She sees these crows kind of pecking at her eyes. Then she sees all these cockroaches climbing over her arms, and we see then that she has again. There's a sign painted on her back that says "She is one." So yeah, at this point, are you getting any closer to working out what's going on here?
Nope, absolutely none. And I don't think you've got any real hints or anything that, even on hindsight, you can't see anything pointing towards what it is at this point. And there's something about this scene that there is something that I can't put my finger on. It reminds me of something in a movie. A very similar scene of somebody hallucinating and things crawling over them. And for the life of me, I can't put my finger on it. But I think it's a fantastic image. I think it's one of the better images of the episode, and it kind of takes away from that possession angle, because you get Gary earlier on saying that he felt as if he was possessed by an animal spirit, and you get to see her hallucinating, where you could believe that's where he's been misconstrued about it, and instantly I'm like, drugged.
Yeah, because it doesn't really feel like the animal spirit in this sense, the crow, is trying to possess her. Oh. It seems like it's trying to. Have you just remembered?
Got it. Yeah, Scarecrow and Batman.
Really?
The gas.
Oh, the gas. Right. Yeah. Okay.
When they start to get those freaky.
Yeah.
Images.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Right. Sorry to interrupt you there, Brian. It just popped in my head.
It's all right. But no, it kind of reminded me of The Crow, to be honest. There's a scene in that when the crow pecks out a woman's eyeballs. I think it's the woman. But it kind of reminded me of that. But yeah, it is a nice visual, and it's dated pretty well, I think, considering.
Yeah, very much so.
So Mulder gets off the phone with Danny, and Scully comes in. So they're at the hotel room. Scully comes in and says she was the girl who was found out in the forest was drugged with a controlled substance that only a doctor or pharmacist could get hold of. And it turns out that Odin, leader of the Church of the Red Museum, is an MD.
Dun, dun,
Dun,
dun.
dun. Yeah,
man,
exactly.
Do you know, at this point, it's starting to feel like they're putting a little bit too much pressure on the Red Museum, who haven't really been in this episode at all. So already I'm starting to forget that they're about, and I've taken them off the list of suspects.
Yeah.
it feels as if they're pushing him too hard.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so I mean, to be honest, but by the time we get to this episode, I find very little reason for them being here, except for the whole. Yeah, well, we'll get to it. So they go to speak with Odin, who refuses to let them in under religious grounds. And then his people surround Mulder and Scully's car like the village of the damned. So Mulder arrests Odin. Bit wacky, you know. If you're, if you don't want
you were saying earlier on before we started recording how this really reminded you of Genderbender a lot. Oh
yeah, it really did. Because we talked about how, you know, this episode does have the flavour of so many other episodes. You know, a Monster of the Week episode, an episode like the pilot, and here with this religious cult, I kept thinking of Genderbender. I kept going back to that kind of horrible take on Amish culture, the non-Amish, and this kind of feels the same way, to be honest. You
even get that similar scene with them all standing outside the door. You get in Genderbender as well.
Yeah, definitely. Okay. I mean, you're supposed to not repeat the mistakes of the past, aren't you? And Genderbender was definitely a mistake. Let's face it. It wasn't the strongest episode. But yeah, so they arrest Odin, take him in for questioning, and at the police station, Mulder tries to question Odin, who tells him he's never prescribed or administered the drug to anyone. The sheriff starts kind of shouting at him and basically being really unprofessional. Proper goes off the reins, to the point where Mulder's got to ask him to leave the room. So
again, small town police are useless. Unable to control themselves, unable to think, unable to act.
Yeah, and as I said before, the apple doesn't fall very far from the tree. To quote Batman Begins again, it's because the sheriff comes back in. Mulder barely gets any time to speak to Odin when the sheriff comes back in and tells him that there's something going on outside. So they all go outside to check out this trouble in the streets, and the Red Museum people are basically having a demonstration outside the barbecue beef place that Mulder and Scully were eating at earlier. Because when your leader has been arrested, the best thing to do is try and piss off the local police and the police force.
Yeah. It's such a weird image as well, because there's literally about 8-10 of them standing there. There seems to be like a good 30-40 townspeople, and their whole form of protest is to hold hands and sway in front of the barbecue place. It's such a funny image when you really stand back and look at it. It's just silly but awesome.
Yeah. So Rick, as I say, not too far from the tree, comes over with a bucket of blood and throws it all over them. His dad does drag him off, which I guess says something about his dad. His dad drags him off, giving him a bit of a shouting at. And then this rather dodgy-looking old guy kind of shakes his head at Scully. Come over here. So Scully,
the kind of move that would have a normal person running in the opposite direction.
Yeah, exactly. And given the fact that Scully is currently working an abduction case and has literally just been abducted herself, she does the only logical thing. She goes over to him on her own and has a chat. Yeah.
The only way this guy could have been more suspect is if he was in a white panel van and was offering her a sweetie.
So, he looks at her and says, "There's something I'd like to show you." So, cut to Mulder and Scully being driven by this guy in his van. And he shows them a farm that he used to own, which now has two men on it who are injecting cattle. So yeah, they're injecting cattle with bovine growth hormone. And this guy theorizes that the hormone is responsible for, well, basically for all the nasty behavior in the town. There's been a lot of rapes in the town in recent years. You know, you've got these abductions going on. People just in general haven't been as nice to each other as they were like years ago. And he thinks it's all down to what we inject into our cows. You know, this isn't just something in the X-Files. This is what we do. We beef our beef up, you know, to get more meat off them. And so, yeah, this is actually
really. On you
go. For me, it's probably the best part of the episode in the sense that it does touch a nerve. It is quite a scary thought to think, actually, do we fully understand the ramifications of the stuff we inject into the things we eat?
I mean, this scene, it feels like it's going to be another exposition scene, but the information that it's given you is genuinely really pretty interesting and pretty sound, and it's not fantastical. It feels plausible in a way that it goes, hang on a second, that could actually be happening. We could be doing that to ourselves, eating this thing. Now, there's three things about this scene that kind of bug me a little bit. Now, we get the guy with the glasses, and the glasses are very familiar, so we're already on the fact that this is probably the Peeping Tom.
Yeah.
Because in this town, he seems to be the only person wearing the type of spectacles that we've seen. Two, these guys seem to have only one cow in their field, which is I mean, unless they're going to beef this thing up to the size of like a small house, I don't see them making much money off their cattle business. And then three, I'm pretty sure that the old guy just leaves Mulder and Scully in the middle of this field and drives off and leaves them there.
Yeah, that didn't occur to me at all, but I think you're right. He does. He just kind of leaves them to it.
Yeah,
but yeah, even the cattle thing, to be honest, I didn't think about until you just mentioned it. Which is, they literally just have the one cow. Do they go to the farm, bring out a cow, do the stuff on it, take it back, and then lug out another one? It does feel a bit piecemeal the way they're doing business. So after that, and still some intrigue there, and I do like that that theory that the guy puts forward. But then we get the next scene, and this really is where the episode starts to seriously derail. Basically, it's nighttime and a plane crashes. There's a doctor on board it. We find out later he's a doctor. This guy is clutching a case, and the plane crashes. And the reason this is so annoying and so derailing for this episode is that it's by sheer coincidence this plane crashes. I mean, I don't know if I missed something, but I don't remember them telling us that it was sabotaged in any way. It literally. This guy, the findings that they get from this plane crash, literally gives Mulder and Scully the break they need in the case. So if this plane didn't just randomly, coincidentally crash, they'd be going nowhere. Case over. Nothing left to investigate. It's literally Deus ex machina, or whatever the phrase is. It's just, they've pulled this out of their backside, hoping no one is going to notice.
I mean, I think the worst thing is it's a character that we've never even seen before. At least introduce him earlier on in the episode, saying that, I'll answer some questions when I come back. I'm going out of town for a bit of business or something, or a medical emergency. I'll be back in a day or two, and I'll be able to answer any questions you have. Does anything at all that tie this scene to the rest of the movie? Because if you're not paying attention, you're going to think you changed the episodes. It comes that out of the blue.
And it's like,
but I'm with you 100%.
I mean, we get a few more scenes a little later on with this hitman, and it's like, why couldn't they have had this doctor in the car, and why not have the hitman taking him out, making it look like a car crash. But whatever experiments this doctor's been doing, they're done. They're over with. He's finished them. Therefore, the government want to clean up, tidy up the evidence, so you get this hitman to knock him out. That would have been a much better explanation rather than just, nope, by sheer blind bad luck, coincidence, his plane crashes. Right next to the field as well, I might add, where
that one cow is.
Yeah, where that one cow is. So, yeah, it's just annoying. So we're at the crash site. Mulder and Scully see that the briefcase was full of money, as well as some little glass vials.
And it's completely undamaged.
Yeah, that plane blew up, and yet these glass vials are perfectly fine. So the doctor was a man called Gerald, or something or other, and he was the last of the county doctors, apparently. So we cut from there to Scully being on the phone with someone just as Mulder enters, and they've both found out the exact same piece of information, which is that all the kids who've been abducted were treated by this doctor. So, yeah, like I say, a piece of information that we would not learn if that plane had not just crashed. We go from there to, and this could have something to do with the fact that they work on one cow at a time, but we cut back, it's morning time, and the people who are injecting the cow have just finished work.
Yes.
I don't know if they've just been working through the night injecting their cattle, but there you go. They've just finished work in the field. Then the pervert dude leaves just as Deep Throat's killer arrives and shoots his partner. So, yeah, did you recognise this guy as Deep Throat's killer when he first appeared on screen?
Nope, not at all. I thought he was a government agent because he just has that look about him. But no, I did not put two and two together. I didn't realise it was the same person.
Yeah. Okay.
And I was surprised as well when he just shoots the guy straight away. That came as a bit of a shock. But I added a wee bit more intrigue into the episode. Not that we need it anymore, because there's plenty there.
That's the thing with this one. I think there's nothing but intrigue, but it gets to the point where, like, there's only so much intrigue you can throw at someone before you have to start giving some answers, and you have to start giving some kind of thread that makes sense. And this, it just seems to be, constantly, let's intrigue on top of intrigue, but no real payoff. So Mulder and Scully, they go to see Gary's mum to ask about Dr. Gerald. And apparently he'd been giving Gary and loads of other kids a vitamin shot for years as a preventative measure. And it seems to have worked, as Gary has never been sick a day in his life, apparently. But Mulder finds the room behind the mirror, along with a private video collection. So... Yeah.
Yes. The most disorganised video collection ever. I still can't get around my head why all the tapes are still there and not away somewhere else where they can be viewed properly.
Yeah, it makes no sense. It's like, what does he do? Does he records them there, then he watches them there as well in that little room? Like, I mean,
it's
as if...
It's weird.
Yeah, it's bizarre. Surely you would record it, then take it to your private home. I don't get it either. It makes no sense. And
I feel as if it should have been Scully that found it as well, because she noticed the light earlier on in the episode, and I feel like she should have been the one that again just went, that's not right, and
absolutely
found it there.
Absolutely, and it would have called back to the scene earlier in which it looked like Scully kind of. She did feel like something was off. She was looking at it. And maybe in this scene, if you have her kind of work that out, then that's a payoff, isn't it, from the scene earlier?
Yeah.
Whereas having Mulder do it, it's like, well, actually, you've just stolen that payoff. And you've made it even less believable that this would get found. So, yeah, a little bit annoying, must be said. Okay, so we go from there, and Rick and his buddy are out drinking, and his buddy goes to drain the lizard, as he says, and then the pervert guy grabs Rick, and I actually thought it was the buddy who was going to get taken.
Oh yeah, same here.
Yeah, like in all horror movies, he's the one who goes out for a pee in the bush, but it's actually Rick who gets taken from the safety of the car. So, Rick is then found later with a gunshot wound to the head from Deep Throat's killer, or at least I think it's Deep Throat's killer.
Yeah, no idea. I have no idea how he turns up dead at all.
It's really hazy. It looks like... Well, it looks like pervy guy has shown up to do his usual thing. You know, he's going to write his message on the back, drug him up like he usually does. But our friend Deep Throat's killer has intervened at some point and blown this kid away, put a bullet through him. Why he's done that, I'm not quite sure. Maybe he's trying to pin it on this pervert guy as if he's not in enough trouble as it is. It makes no sense. But what makes even less sense is geography, because this guy has shot Rick, and before he gets to his car to ditch the gun, to ditch the weapon, Rick's body is already surrounded by investigators, and his dad has already been told, informed, gets there, has a bit of a cry. All that happens before the killer even gets back to his car to toss the gun in, which, just makes no sense to me at all.
No.
And
the fact that the body's found in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, precisely. It feels like a scene's been cut, quite frankly. It seems like we should. It seems like we should have seen a scene in which the guy shoots Rick, and then goes, dumps the gun, and then we see his buddy find Rick. I don't know. It makes no sense. Just the timings of it. What happened to the pervy guy? Why? Yeah, it's a really muddled scene, and it's not particularly well edited, but I think that's also down to the script. It starts with script editing all the way through to final edit. But so, were you going to say something?
Nope.
Okay, so we go from there. Scully is reading Gerd Thomas's file, because obviously they found all the tapes back of the house, and the whole block of flats where Gary and his family live, it belongs to this man, Gerd Thomas. So he is the obvious person to go to question about these tapes and this room that's been found.
It's the kind of unusual interview scene.
Yeah, sorry, just before we get to that interview, as they're going to that, they pass a car with Deep Throat's killer in it, and Scully she clocks him, but she doesn't quite recognise him. She has a moment where she's like, "Who is that?" But then kind of just tosses it to one side because she can't work it out. So
so back to Gert.
Gerd,
who has one of the most unusual interview scenes ever, where he just freely admit, you feel this guy's just been 100% honest, which is unusual. You know, did you do this to these kids? Yep, but I didn't kill them. But I did do all that. Yeah. And I believe him. Obviously, we've just seen.
I believe him. But there's definitely something off with him, isn't there? But it's again
the honest psychopath.
That rare breed. But it's it's very, again, it's contrivance, isn't it? Because this is sheer bad luck again, that this guy. I mean, we'll get there. We're not quite there yet. Sorry, we'll just put a pin in it, as they say. Hang on. So he says that he didn't kill Rick. He did all the other stuff, but he didn't kill Rick. Now he says that Dr. Gerald had been injecting into them the same thing he'd injected into the cattle, which caused the rapes several years back. Now, that's why Thomas wrote he or she is one, because they had been changed. So basically, he's backing up the theory of the old guy who used to own that farm, the one who kind of nodded Scully over. It's
Is it roughly around? Well, I started losing interest when the plane crash happens. Around about this point, I've checked out.
Right. Yeah.
Checked out completely. I've lost interest.
I think I'm with you, to be honest. It just because it just feels exactly like what you said at the start, that they're throwing everything, including the kitchen sink, into this. And there's so many strands going on, so many different kind of storylines that they're trying to make meet, that it just doesn't quite work. And you're always thinking, what's that? What's the main thread? You know, the episode is called Red Museum. We've been introduced to the Church of the Red Museum, and then they've just kind of disappeared. It doesn't really seem to be about them. It feels like they got the wrong title for this episode. But yeah, anyway, it's at this point that Scully remembers the face of Deep Throat's killer and tells Mulder that the stuff that was in the vial contains the same purity control from the Erlenmeyer flask. If you remember that there was the whole purity control thing in that. So the kids were the result, basically, of government testing with alien DNA, and Gerd Thomas is just some loser who's blown their cover. So that's basically what I was getting at, which is that, again, this is another sheer coincidence. So everything that happens in this case, how it even came about to be investigated, you know, the stuff with the doctor, the purity control, everything gets found out by sheer coincidence. Anyway, Mulder goes to Gary's mum, tells her to pack up the boys and come with him, and he tells the sheriff to do the same with his with the other survivors of all the other families, and he takes them to the Church of the Red Museum to hide out.
Yeah. And they're back. We haven't forgotten all about them.
Yeah, for all of 20 seconds. They're here to hide these kids, basically. And it's just... Yeah, I mean, there's a commentary there, I guess, about how, you know, the very people who have been bullying them, who've been calling them names, are now needing their protection. I guess that kind of rubs their nose in it a bit. But, I don't really feel invested in them enough to care all that much.
No, I'm with you 100%.
Okay. So Mulder goes from there because Mulder basically the whole reason that Mulder has sent these families to there for protection is because he's figured that someone is probably going to try and clean up all the evidence, basically. Once Dr. Gerald's plane went down and that evidence was found, the vials, the money, so, you know, someone is going to come out and try and clear up the evidence. And those families are part of that. And that's one of the reasons Rick, so Mulder believes, was killed. So Mulder goes to the place where he thinks that this guy, this Deep Throat's killer, will go to, which is the beef factory that we saw at the beginning. Because obviously this is the place where all the beef is. You know, all this cattle that's been injected with purity control. that's evidence, basically. So that's evidence that this guy's going to want to destroy. So Mulder goes there, and I got to say, I love the name of this place. It's an acronym or whatever you call it, anagram. I don't know what you call it. It's an acronym, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes.
And it's called Jazzed Beef. You know, as in jazzed up, as in injected with something to jazz it. Yeah. It's just really on the nose, but it was mildly amusing. Anyway, Deep Throat's killer is there, dousing everything in gasoline. He traps Mulder in a refrigerator and is about to blow the place when Scully and the police walk in and the sheriff shoots the man dead, basically leaving us with nothing.
Yeah. It's the most uninteresting fight sequence ever.
Yeah.
Like I pretty much, like I tuned out when it got to the meat plant. I couldn't really be bothered with anything at all. I was just like, yeah, sure, whatever. Just get to the fight, have it done with it. Because I really feel like it should have been Scully.
Yeah.
Because she's the one that's got the history with this guy. She's the one that's seen him kill Deep Throat. I know it was Mulder's
informant.
Guy. Yeah. But still, it feels like it should have been tying up Scully's aspect of that story.
I mean, it may have been Mulder's informant, but it was still Scully who saw him get shot. Mm-hmm. So, you know, even there, she should really have the emotional payoff of... I'm with you on that one. It's really anticlimactic because the fact that they don't get anything from this guy just means the whole thing is a waste. Like, what do we achieve? What do we achieve from this episode? We achieve nothing. We learn nothing.
No.
Now,
exactly.
We get one final moment at the end where we have Scully's voiceover just wrapping everything up. She says that Deep Throat's killer isn't identified, so pointless bringing him back, quite frankly. If you're not going to get anything out of him, you didn't really need to bring him back. We never needed that catharsis, really, of seeing this guy get brought down, because the whole point was always that he was just some faceless government grunt. You know, it didn't matter that if we ever saw him again. So the fact that they bring him back, that means, okay, if you're bringing this guy back, then you're going to do something with him, and they don't. They just kill him. We learn nothing from him, so it's a bit pointless. The kids that were all injected with this stuff by the doctor have now started to catch a strange flu. The vile substance, the purity control, has broken down to the degree where it can't be tested on. It's useless. The eatery where Mulder and Scully went to has closed down, and finally, probably the only piece of information that is of any interest to me is that the Red Museum were perhaps a control group. So that really was their purpose, because they were vegetarians, because they didn't touch any of the meat that this town kind of thrives on, lives on. They made a perfect control group for whatever experiment was being done. You know, if you're going to test this drug out on the town's population, it helps to have people there who you know are not eating their product. So, beyond that is it. It's a bit of a waste of time. Go on. You wrap up first. Wrap up your thoughts.
It's an episode that's full of promise. I think it gives you lots of intrigue at the start. It gives you lots of cool imagery. It leads to things that you hope is going to go, and I think it ultimately let down by a very poor, very contrived second half. You have Scully, who should be the central point of this investigation almost. She should discover the hole in the wall. She should have the fight with the government agent at the end to close the loop of that story, and it doesn't happen, and ultimately it leaves you with a middle of the road feeling. You know, an episode that could have been great turned out to be meh, and I gave it 2.5 out of 5.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, I will confess I didn't have my grade quite that low when we first came to this. But talking about it, it kind of solidifies some of those problems, which when I watched it probably weren't that bad, but as we talk about it, it's just actually this episode isn't that great. I'm with you. I give it a 2.5 out of 5. And I think ultimately the problem is this is a mythology episode, and if you completely get rid of it, it makes no difference. Like, no, yeah, if you got rid of it, no one would know any different. They wouldn't feel like they were missing a part of the story, the overall story, which is what you should feel like with a mythology episode. You should always get more questions, more information given to you that kind of, but you just don't with that. So 2.5 out of 5 from me as well.
Yeah. And there we have it. So tell us a little bit about the next episode, which is Excelsior Day. Surely it's going to be better than Red Museum.
I so wish I could tell you that, but for me personally, I mean, there are a couple more contenders in the season. Dodd Calm, I remember being one, and Fearful Symmetry, possibly. But I think Excelsis Day may be the worst episode of season 2. So
right, okay. Oh well, that's something to look forward to. So join us next week for episode 11 of season 2 of the X-Files Revisited.